Hello and welcome to episode 301 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert. As always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, welcome back. How are you doing? Oh, Merry Christmas, by the way. This is the last one before Christmas.
Yeah, so this is the last episode of 2020 before Christmas, which is probably glad to see the back of this year. But we thought that we'd do something a bit different, didn't we, this week? As it's Christmas, as it's the end of 2020. And a lot of you, when we've had people on the podcast recently, said it was great to hear some other voices. So we've decided, haven't we, Andy, which is why we're quite excited this week, to have the entire Money to the Masses team on the podcast. So that you're not going to just hear me and Andy this week. You're going to hear the rest of the team talk about, we're going to basically interview everyone, chat and have a bit. This is basically what our Zoom calls are like each week. Probably a slightly more toned down version that we can actually publish. So we're both excited about doing it.
I have to be honest, it's causing me quite a headache in terms of like you know what I'm like, Damien. I'm a bit of a pedant when it comes to audio and clean and quality. So we've only got 2 proper mics, and then we're using AirPods and headphones, and we've got people who are unfortunately not very well, and they'll be coughing as well. So basically, I'd just like to say, from my point of view, the audio quality might not be up to my usual standard, but the quality of the podcast itself is going to be better than it's ever been. How about that?
Yeah, and we're hoping we'll get some sort of stray children come onto the podcast, or animals or anything like that, with our fingers crossed. So what we'll do is we're going to go round the team and let them introduce themselves very briefly and tell you what they actually do at Money to the Masses. I'm intrigued at what Justin is going to say, because I've not worked out what he does after about 5 or 6 years of being. So I'll start with, in the order that I see people, I'll go with Liam. If you introduce yourself, you've actually been on the podcast before, I think many years ago. So you're one of the early people. Yeah. So you introduce yourself and tell people what you do.
Yeah, my appearance on the podcast, like my Strictly Come Dancing, I went off in the first week. So I'm one of the directors of the business, along with Justin and Damien. And I also write articles mainly around property. And I also get up at 7:30 every Sunday morning to do the Sunday papers and the property papers. So, sort of background, admin, etc., etc.
Yeah, so Liam is the person who does, because that's actually probably our most popular piece in the newsletter each week. And Liam does it. He's even done it on holiday on the other side of the world.
Florida, Australia.
Yeah, right. Don't show off.
Borneo and all those places.
The rest of us are stuck in Bromley and South East London.
I think I've been on that beach behind Lauren's head.
Lauren's decided to put a Zoom background on, and Liam thinks he's been on that beach. Next person, moving swiftly on, Laura, who is our newest recruit. Laura's our newest recruit to the Money to the Masses team.
Yeah, still the newbie. So I'm the consumer credit editor. Writes about credit cards, mortgages, and also starting to do some more investment bits and pieces as well. Yeah.
So Laura is a journalist by trade. For how many years you worked in journalism? I'm probably going to give away your age, which is something
I'd rather not say. About 15 years.
So it's quite good for somebody who's only 21. So 15 years in the industry. Laura, we got as we expanded the team in 2020, because if you've listened to this podcast, Andy and I were the original people obviously on the podcast. Andy didn't even work for Money to the Masses then. So in the 300 episodes since, the team has grown. So Laura was one of the people, actually the only person who technically has a journalistic background on Money to the Masses. We all write and talk about money, but Laura's the only person who actually has done something for a living in the content world. Next up is Harvey, who's our sort of second newest recruit.
Yes. Hi, I'm Harvey. I write in the personal insurance side of things on Money to the Masses. So I'll be covering all your life insurance, your critical illness, your income protection, all that sort of stuff.
And so if you're ever in the group, so facebook.com/groups/Money to the Masses, each of these guys are in that group. So if you see them pipe up or answer your question specifically on topic, now you understand why. Because Harvey, I know, jumps on the protection stuff. She gets quite excited when people ask.
I do. I love it. I love a question, because predominantly the questions are for you, Damien. You know, they're investment orientated, so you get to help all those people. But I'm just itching to help the people that have questions about life insurance and critical illness cover and sick pay insurance and all these other wonderful things that you need in life.
Yeah, so Harvey inspired the piece that we did with Emma. So about the protection. So that was Harvey's idea, which is why we did that whole piece, which was incredibly popular. Next up is Lauren?
Yeah, so I'm officially the editorial assistant at Money to the Masses, but I do a bit of everything. So I look after all of the social media that you see on Facebook, Instagram, and some of the stuff that goes out on Twitter. I also do the Millennial Money series on YouTube. And more recently, I've started to write a bit more about general insurance, so particularly pet insurance. So if you do have any questions about pet insurance, be sure to send them over to me and I'll be happy to answer those for you.
So Lauren, all the social media stuff you see out there, which looks brilliant, it's nothing to do with like me or Andy. It's all Lauren who does that stuff. So Lauren does that as well as all the other bits she does. Like I say, she writes about now the things like pet insurance and general insurance. So we're expanding that side of what we do. So you'll pick up that each person who's got a different expertise, they sometimes actually provide content for the podcast. Even though Andy and I do the podcast, some of that is fed through and comes from other people. So lastly, people know what Andy does, so I'm going to skip you, Andy, unfortunately. And Justin, just tell us the rest of the world what it is you do.
Before Justin does, Damien, can I suggest you get a pad out and a pen and you just take some notes here for future reference?
This is borderline bullying. I'm Justin, and I'm responsible for all the operations of Money to the Masses, making it work. I'm responsible for the commercial side of it. I am essentially the shoulders on which this lot stand on. That's my non-modest claim. Yes.
Yeah, and Damien's stunt double.
Yeah.
The thing is, you'll probably notice it's quite good because Justin's got a slight echo on his mic, I think. Otherwise, our voices sound identical. So that is fortunate that that's actually occurred. So so that's the whole team. So we decided we want to have a chat to introduce people to you. So we've got some questions that we're going to pose to team members. So I suppose we'll start off with something to do with children, given that most of us have kids. I mean, what is the one money lesson that you'd like your kids to learn? Let's start with Liam. Why don't you go first?
Well, my advice to any child is to try and get them to have a work ethic where they can understand that the harder they work at something, the more they'll get in reward. So rather than maybe just looking to save money on cutting costs, maybe work harder. It's 24 hours in a day, get a second job, third job. If you want something bad enough, that's my tip.
Yeah, just to clarify, Liam's not talking about child slavery. He's talking about just generally. You're talking more widely in terms of when they grow
broadly,
up.
Yes.
Yeah, second job. Yeah, I like that one. So moving on to Andy, what do you think?
I suppose the thing for me is it's just going from personal experience. We've talked about it before on the podcast, Damien. I was terrible with money growing up. I was too reliant on credit cards, easy credit. It was all available in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. And I kind of set myself up for a bit of a fall in later. I've recovered now and things are all rosy, but I think, I'm 10 or 15 years behind where I should have been. And I think, so my message to my children would be, think really carefully about easy credit. Think about whether you need something, work hard, save up for it, and try wherever you can not to use credit lines. That would be my thing really for my children.
What about you, Harvey?
I think from my point of view, I've always said to my children to set goals in all parts of their lives. So I'd probably attribute goal setting as the highest thing on the list of things I'd want them to learn. So, set yourself goals. Every time you achieve one, you get that great feeling, and then that spurs you on to the next goal. And don't stop setting yourself goals because, it's a great feeling. Plodding along, I think, which a lot of us do, and just getting by doesn't give you that sensibility for the future. And I think, I'd love for them to just learn about setting goals, achieving them, having that great feeling that goes with achieving a goal.
I'll ask Justin next because I'm intrigued to ask Lauren as well, because obviously Lauren is, well, technically, I think Lauren is, I don't know, are you classed as a millennial, Lauren? That horrible term that I hate.
Yeah, I'm classed as a millennial, yeah.
So you're nearer the age at which people are being taught personal finance. So I'm intrigued to what you think, actually, because we all sit there and say what we teach our kids and whether there's anything that you actually think you needed to have been taught. Justin, why don't you finish off with us oldies?
If I could teach my children, it would be you don't have to spend it. As soon as they get their money, they just spend it. It doesn't even matter what it's on. It could be, I've got £5, let's go on a magazine. I'm not even thinking anything grandiose in life. I just wish that when they got their pocket money, they just didn't blow it. I just want them to just be a little bit longer term, not so short term. I just find it frustrating as hell. That's really for me.
What sort of thing do your kids buy?
Oh, it could be anything from, sweets I'm going to let pass because I like sweets. But they just sit there and they'll literally buy something on Roblox that's like a floating unicorn, or it'll be some kind of it'll be a magazine that's got a toy on the front, and the magazine's worth £6, and they sort of say, well, this is my pocket money, so technically, can't I spend it on what I want? And the answer is, yeah, but I then sit there arguing with them that it's not probably the best thing to spend it on. So I would just like them to think a little bit more about what they spend their money on. That's all. I don't want them to save it for the rainy days and all of that. I just want them to be a little bit more mindful, because they spend it and they use it and then they just don't seem that bothered afterwards. They're not even bothered. They haven't got any more money there.
They've got you to give them next week's pocket money.
Yeah, that's probably it. I suppose it's probably to do with it's a reflection on me, but I just like them to probably just be a little bit more mindful with their money and maybe save a little bit more for things that they actually want. And I'm actually going to say that we did that Go Henry at that this year, because my children are terrible at it, and it actually made a massive difference to one of them. They actually, for the first time ever, saved stuff, and I thought that was amazing.
Laura, you look like you wanted to jump in there.
So even before I joined the team, I remember listening to the podcast and hearing the episode about how to start saving so that when you reach retirement age, you have £1 million sort of in the pot. And it really struck a chord with me, and especially that idea of compound interest, and like the fact that the earlier you can start saving, the better. And I think that that's something that I've perhaps been guilty of not doing, and I'd really love my girls to get into the habit of saving and not just frittering their money away on rubbish, and just to get into that savings habit, really.
That particular episode was probably one of the most popular we ever did, and which was quite funny because I think it was almost hours before that podcast show went out, and I was trying to think of an idea of what we would do. Then sometimes it ends up being those ideas, when you actually put them down, they actually become the sort of impromptu ones, become some of the most well received. And actually, I now do some of the stuff I talked about on that podcast, because I hadn't done all that compounding for my own kids. So it just shows you every day is a learning day. Lauren, talk about learning. What's your view on what younger people should learn at schools, or what you want to teach your children?
Mine is the value of money, and that's just because I remember the first time in my first job when I really understood the true value of money. And I used to work for Diggerland on a measly £3 something an hour, and I never forget the first time I learned the value of money when I went on my lunch break and I spent, I think it was something ridiculous like £12 in the cafe for my lunch. And then it suddenly dawned on me that I just spent my morning's hourly wage on my lunch, so I just wasted the whole morning of working at Tigland on the bumper cars on my lunch. And when I had that realisation, I was actually really put out. So I just think it's quite important that you learn the value of money, because when you know it, when you're a lot younger, it kind of, it hits home how long it takes to earn and build up money if you want to buy something that costs a decent amount, especially if you have like £20 pair of shoes that you potentially don't need, or, the latest Xbox game that's like £50. If they're aware of how much it costs, like an adult in working hours or them in their pocket money, then I think it's just a really good skill that people should be aware of as they grow older, just so that, not saying that they can't spend their money on nice things, but just so they know how hard you have to work to get the nice things.
Yeah, the hourly rate one, we did that on a podcast, one of the tricks to learn your hourly rate, which is you divide it by, we knock off the 3 zeros and divide it by 2 roughly, isn't it? So yeah. That would be, that is a great way of working out what your hourly rate is, and then you work out how long, like you explained, to actually earn something. But you also did explain there why everybody I've ever seen running a ride at a theme park looks so miserable, because I always thought that was going to be like an amazing job, but I think everybody's just worked out that they've only just paid for their lunch. But you just made me think of another question, which isn't one that we were going to talk about, but I just think that your Diggerland is a job that you've done. I know Andy's done some interesting jobs. So has anybody done an interesting job? My worst job was probably fruit picking in the summers in Kent. I know Justin did it with me. Anybody else got any jobs that they've done in the past that are unusual?
I used to be a door-to-door brush salesman.
So Leo, talk me through that. Is it like one of those things like Trigger? Because there was a famous episode with Trigger, and I got
similar.
A new head.
Yeah, you had a big suitcase full of brushes and all sorts of stuff, and it had a really easy release clip on it. So you knocked on someone's door, and then the case was already open. So when they come to the door, they go, "Any brushes today, love?" and they'd look at you as if you sort of come from another planet.
Did you find it difficult to sell, Liam, or did you find basically that most people just gave you the brush off?
Andy,
Boom.
such an Andy joke.
Yeah. No.
This is an insight into the money to the masses world of Andy's like dad jokes.
Thing is, you'd take it, you'd just sweep it under the carpet, wouldn't you?
So Andy,
Dust yourself off. Yeah.
Andy, what was your job, which obviously you're still doing in a roundabout way at Money to the Masses?
I was effectively a children's entertainer. I used to balance things and juggle and do a bit of singing and terrible jokes and that kind of thing. I was a redcoat, essentially, or a sort of poorer version of a redcoat. Basically, didn't quite have the skills to a redcoat, so I moved to the next one down, which was Haven Holidays. But yeah, it was good fun. Couple of summer seasons. I tell you what, I did have a worse job than that, though. For one summer season, I made, those medical packs that they pack organs in, the like ice packs. I actually made ice packs for a whole summer once, and it involves cutting that oasis, the stuff you put fake flowers in, the green spongy stuff, and you used to have to soak it in water and then put it inside these and then heat seal them into these packs. And my hands were freezing cold and wrinkly.
That's incredible. That was your job for an entire summer.
Yeah, entire summer I made medical packs.
But it sounds like you probably did yourself some harm with the stuff that you're packing. You also made cardboard boxes. Was it you that made cardboard boxes?
Yeah, it was part of the same thing, part of the same firm. Yeah, I had to make cardboard boxes, which is a bizarre thing, but you cut it to size and then you stamp it with all the slits in it, and then you make boxes, bespoke boxes to for people that are selling stuff online and stuff. Yeah,
A great talent pool. This we've got a brush salesman and a cardboard box maker.
I was for a period of time a taxi driver in London as well, which the drawback was I didn't know my way around London. So I was, it was a taxi office in Hampstead, quite posh, and I had an old beat up car, and I was taking people down to Central. I didn't have a clue where I was going. I knew the basic roads, but I didn't know anything tricky. But to make it worse, I had an automatic car, which this is like going back donkey's years.
Yeah, what years? What decade, roughly?
Oh, it's got to be more than 40 years ago, this. So I did actually have a car.
We're not quite horse and cart era.
No, just
We've
after
progressed.
just post horse and cart. But I had a car with an automatic gearbox, and they were very poor in those days. So if I ever went up an incline, even the slightest incline, it kept jumping out of gear. And I remember taking this bloke down into central London, and I was looking, I don't know where I'm going really. I'm looking in my mirror thinking, oh, he's all right. He's like reading the paper or whatever. And then after about 20 minutes going around the houses, he said in a very posh voice, "What route are you actually taking?" Which one I sort of shrugged. Not quite sure. But then whenever I went up a slope, the gears would drop out. And so you get up and go, it'd take you about 5 minutes to go up a very short incline. It's very embarrassing. I didn't last long.
So this was pre-Uber. So you weren't even, no knowledge, no
This was
official
pre-internet.
knowledge.
No.
Yeah.
I was winging it.
So you were the precursor to the legal cabbies, you really were. So you're a pioneer in the cabbie world.
Yeah. A bit like Lauren as well. I realised after a while, because you had to pay for your connection to the cab office so much a week, and I realised I was only earning in a week roughly what I had to give back to them and to pay for my.
And Lauren's had the most interesting job, I think. She was an air stewardess. So Lauren's flown around the world.
Yeah, that was the job, and now I often get memories pop up on my phone. I did the other day actually. 2 years ago, I was on the beach in the Maldives, and I was actually sitting at home looking out the window when it was raining in the middle of a pandemic. So.
You sound like somebody who's not enjoying their job, Lauren.
Well, I didn't want to say.
You're the only person on this call with a beach background who's talking about a previous job in such a fond term.
I had a massively depressing job when I was at uni. So I did lots of admin roles, like in the summer holidays. And one of them was working for a charity. And it was like an animal adoption charity. And it was my job to write people letters to tell them that their animal had died and try and get them to adopt another one.
We've got a winner.
Yeah,
We've got a winner.
It was.
Sorry, I should have laughed so much at that.
It just started really getting me down, week after week.
I just tell you what, there was such a an eclectic mix of jobs that you never knew existed, from writing things about dead animals to Andy's cardboard box making. Right. One of the things I think is going to be popular is like, what was your worst ever purchase? So who wants to go first on their worst ever purchase?
I'll do mine quickly. It's cars. Back in the day when you'd get, very cheap car and didn't last long before it broke. I had a car that caught a light once. It was that bad. I was driving along, stopped at a junction, and this bloke come up behind me, knocked on the window, said, "There's all steam coming out the front of your car." And I did the worst thing you can do if you think your car's a light, is open the bonnet, and that's what I did. And it was a time bomb. Yeah. So
Do you know, I'm noticing a theme here. If ever Liam offers a lift to me for a Money to the Masses event, I'm going to decline it because I'm noticing a theme.
you won't get there.
Yeah, actually, on that theme, Liam once sold a car to Justin, and it broke down, didn't it? And he got rid of it in about three months.
Actually, do you know what? That will go up there as the worst purchase I think I've ever made. In 3 months, it was just literally out of its warranty. Like when I took over it after 3 years, and I thought, this would be all right. He's an old boy. He's not driven it much. And then literally within 6 weeks, one of them, I think it was a turbo in it went, then that was gone. It was 4-wheel drive, and the dashboard informed me it was now a 2-wheel drive car because it can no longer be a 4-wheel drive car. And then,
I reversed into it on my drive.
Yeah, then you reversed into it when I parked on your driveway, which to this day is just the most baffling thing ever. Because the thing was, I looked out the window because I saw you reversing, and no people obviously distances won't know, but his driveway can fit 4 cars on it, 2 beside each other and 2 at the back. And he said, "I'm just going to move my car," and he started reversing it. And I'm watching him thinking, he's got a strange angle on that car, and he's going. And I'm thinking, he's going to hit it, is he? And then he just kept going, and I just saw my car just ride up in the air as he crunched into it. And the thing was, he turned and looked at me in the mirror with his face to say, "I just hit that. That's like, I just watched you reverse into my car." So anyway, that side, that actually cost me money in the end because he said I'd pay for it, but I stupidly told the insurance company that he did it, and then they put my premiums up. But yeah, going back to that car after he'd hit it, and then its fuel tank stopped working. It stopped telling me how much petrol it had. So yeah, I lost patience with it. So after I only had it 4 months in total, it probably cost me about 3.5, 4 grand.
I'm surprised you two are still talking, which is, I wouldn't have asked the question if I'd realised it was such a sore point. I didn't realise that it was going to be one person on the podcast pointing to the other.
I couldn't blame him. I mean, I think he told me a ringer, I think.
What was your worst ever purchase, Andy? I mean, yours is a car as well. Well, it seems to be cars, isn't it?
I reckon it is my car story. I possibly talked about it on the podcast before, but for those who haven't heard it, just a brief summary. I once bought a car that was 300 miles away and I didn't own a driving licence. So I was on a work trip and I was going it was up in Leeds, and I was thinking about learning to drive. It was something that was in the process of going to happen. I got chatting to a guy and he happened to mention he had a car for sale. So he drove me around his house. It was his wife's car, and we kicked the tyres. And I said, "Oh, it's good." He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Yeah, I'll buy it." And I don't really know to this day. I think it was like just the pressure, and like it taken me on a journey to look at the car. And so I went to the cash point, drew out the money, given the money for the car, and then I got the train home. And then it was either that night or the next day that it dawned on me. I bought a car that was 300, 400 miles away, and I didn't even have a license. I couldn't even drive it back. Yeah, so the long story is I ended up not passing my test for many, many months, and I got my brother in the end to take a train up. I had to pay for him to get up there and then drive it back for me. And then it sat on the drive, and I think he ended up selling it, or it was just, yeah, I mean, what a stupid purchase that was.
My best ever and worst ever purchase are the same thing, I think. I remember mentioning this in the podcast really, really early on when you asked me the question about sort of the top first 10. It was a tray. I mean, I was young. I was only about 20 odd, and I'd sort of first job, got a bit enthusiastic. It was a tray with water jets in it that if you played music, they would dance like little fountains on this tray, and it would light up at night. So you could sit there in a little thing, like, you get in these grand houses where the water is dancing from one place to another. But this was just like a tray of water that did it, and it cost £200. And that was, I think, the thing. I went to one of those, they don't know what it's called.
A gadget shop.
Yeah, and I walked in there and I seemed to be upsold from the cheapest thing and eventually got to the most expensive thing in the shop and bought it. And then, yeah, it still exists, I think.
It's still in our house, Damien. It's still here.
Oh, Liam's got it. And,
Yeah.
and actually following on from that, it's always gadgets. I bought a rocket. What you meant to do, you put the rocket and you send it up in the air. It was like you wire it up and you press a button and it goes off like a firework and it flies up in the air and it takes a picture of the world above and then you collect it and look at the picture. Well, they didn't quite tell you what it did say on the warnings that don't launch it near an airport. And I mean, obviously I didn't, but I didn't appreciate how high it went. So when it went in there, we lost sight of it. And eventually it drifted probably about a mile downwind and we never got it back. So we spent all this money on a rocket that parachuted back to Earth that just ended up in a business park somewhere. So that's got to be rating up there as one of the worst things I've ever bought because it didn't even do what I asked it. It was kind of a given that it would actually go wrong. So I'm assuming everybody did that. Harvey, have you got any bad purchases or are you way too sensible?
I am. I'm just way too sensible, Damien. I really scratched my head about this and I sort of thought, actually, I've probably got a garage full of things that I've bought over the years, but they've probably served their function now they're in the garage. My husband's ammo did point out to me that I bought a Wii at quite an expense some years ago, and it's never found its way out of the box. I think I had some grandiose idea that it was going to help me to get fit, and it's never really done its job. So that was probably an awful waste of money. But I think at the back of my mind, I always think it will come out. It will do its job at some point when I take it upon myself to follow through. But no, nothing as extravagant as Liam and Andy's stories.
Lauren, I mean, I suppose the younger generation, you're far more sensible than the rest of us.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't have that many, but the only one I can think of is car related as well. Do you remember when I started Money to the Masses and I bought that Peugeot? and I bought the Peugeot and I spent, I think it was $2,000. And it was the first time I bought a used car from someone else. And like, what was it? I think it was a week. And then it went through 2 bottles of oil, had an oil leak, smelt burning.
Wasn't Liam who sold it to you, was it?
No, but yeah, that's probably my worst purchase.
Right, moving on to one of our next questions. This is a bit more... Actually, this one, somebody asked, the best money-related film.
Die Hard.
That is Justin's answer to every question about films. It's Die Hard. It could be any question. The answer is always Die Hard.
Justin has an obsession about Die Hard. That best Christmas movie. It is a Christmas film technically.
Die Hard.
Yeah, so his answer to everything is Die Hard. And he almost once said to Andy that he set him a bit of work to go and watch Die Hard, because Andy's never watched Die Hard, have you, Andy?
Still haven't, no. I might do it this Christmas. I've got a feeling that with lockdown and everything else, I need a pick me up, and Justin has assured me that it's going to change my life, and it is one of the best films, if not the best.
It's the best action movie of all time. It's got everything you need. Baddies dying. It's got
Humour?
Yeah, a bit of humour.
Yeah.
No, fundamentally, no love interest. Spoils every action movie. No love interest. A fantastic death scene, which is the most boring death scene ever, but most realistic. Oh, broken glass, everything. What else do you need?
Has anybody actually watched a film with money in it, though?
No, I beg to differ. The reason they did it, not spoiling it, Andy, but they do it for the gold bullion in the bottom of the building.
That's a bit of a tenuous link, really.
Yeah,
It's a robbery. It's a robbery. It's money. It's money related. It couldn't get... Well, it's not gold bullion, it's bonds, issuable bonds or whatever.
Wolf of Wall Street is obviously up there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think mine is Trading Places. It's just an absolute classic. Great actors, great storyline, plot. Anyone seen Trading Places? You know what I'm talking about? You're looking all blank.
Harvey's nodding. Harvey's seen it.
Yeah, great movie.
Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy. I mean, it's got a great cast. Come on, pork bellies. It's about trading on the stock markets. You can't get any more money related than that.
Do you know, I asked this question to Amo and he came up with a really good movie. He came up with Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
That's a good money story. Like, so the guy works out that his knowledge of taxes could benefit the wardens in the prison and use that as his ticket to get out of prison. How good is that?
Yes, because he's abused and beaten.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Harvey's husband has just won the game, because I think Shawshank Redemption wins it, actually. I think that's a really good film. One of the things that people are always interested in in terms of we've all got different areas of finance we look at and expertise and experience. Is there a part of the money world or something in the money world and the world of finance you would love to see changed? What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Justin this first, because Justin is probably the one person who hasn't had any real background in the money world. So hold on to your horses, because I can imagine what he's going to say. But anyway, Justin, what was your thing you'd change?
A lot of it, to be honest. I'd like the money world to be far less. I was just fascinated how obsessed it is with profit. Absolutely obsessed with profit. It does everything because it has to immediately make money. I'd like to see that change. Put people at the centre of what they're doing. I think long term, you see the benefits of that. Money to the Masses was all about that. I lose count of the number of companies that are out there that actually are launching products, doing things, and they're doing them, let's be honest, because they want to make money. And they've got a very thin story laid over them. So I think that's one thing I'd like to change about the money world. And the other thing I'd like to change about it is I just think it's still far too sexist. It's still far too chauvinist. It's still far too limiting for other kind of groups within society. So yeah, I don't think it's very inclusive. And I think there's a lot they can do. There's people making good noises and good initiatives, but I just think there's a lot more that people could do and a lot more financial inclusion. So yeah, I think it would be about not just doing things because of profits primarily, not always asking how we're going to make money out of that. There's sometimes a longer mission, a longer aim in things.
Taking what Justin just said there, one of the things we do at Money to the Masses is we try and build things that just because they are awesome, like the MOT. And so this isn't like an advert for us. I mean, it is our podcast. We can say what we like, but that idea of sometimes you do something not because of it's got to make profit, it's got to do anything in particular that's going to have an end game, but something that people want is a big driver, which is it's probably something different to some of the guys here when they come and work for us, because it's slightly different to the rest of the industry. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to change?
One thing I would add to that, Damien, as well, is I think the incumbents in the financial industry have so much power because they have so much money and they have such strong balance sheets that they almost can just watch what people are doing and then just acquire it or kind of close it down. It's a bit like the big tech. So they don't always innovate themselves. I just think there's a lot of power that the old kind of institutions have that probably could be liberated a little bit more.
Anyone else?
I'm going to steal one of yours, Damien, actually, but it's always when you said it to me, it made perfect sense. So I'm going to say it on the podcast. I think they should change the name of credit cards. I think the biggest thing holding people back and biggest change they could make is just to change the name of it. Credit card should be called what it is, a debt card. It is you acquiring debt. And psychologically, if they did that, I think it would make a massive difference. But yeah, it was your idea, so I'm not taking credit for it.
All ideas are just there to be developed by somebody else anyway, Andy. You can't own an idea. So no, anybody else got anything they'd like to change about the world of finance that frustrates you?
Mine moves on from Andy's actually, because it's about credit and how, although the companies are trying to explain credit to people with all the terms and conditions, the actual fact is that people don't understand it. So this morning before this podcast, I went on and searched for a loan, a quick loan, and the interest rate was 49.9% for this loan that you could get. And it's all about speed and click here, you get it in a day and all that sort of stuff. They still don't tell you how long it's going to take you to get rid of that loan. And do you really need this? That, the thing about how long it takes you to pay off a credit card, if you just do the minimum payments, something like 23 years or something. No one who's selling loans ever explains that. And I think they're just sucking people into more and more debt.
I think there's definitely a case for more regulation of this kind of credit building idea as well for credit cards, because some of those cards, the APRs are so high. The idea that you're kind of marketing those to people who perhaps had problems with managing credit in the past, have had debt problems, and to then kind of be actively promoting a card that's got a high APR, but you're kind of suggesting that it's somehow going to be helpful, that it's going to build credit. I just think it's really disingenuous, and yeah, it needs to be tightened up.
I remember having to pick Laura off the floor almost when we were pre-lockdown days, when she was writing about this stuff and said, like, do you know how much the interest rates are on these credit cards? Because they are enormous. So, I mean, the buy now, pay later stuff is the new one, isn't it, that's coming along, where I think it's that people calling for regulations, that needs to change. If I had to throw one out there, which is probably one that Harvey would agree with, is I think the finance world is still too insular, too inward looking, and it needs to listen more to people who are external to it. They don't focus on consumers. So they do things to try and express their knowledge or their almost exclusive ownership of some of that knowledge by creating terms and everything. So they end up making it that people have to pay them to be able to do things. So I think that kind of way that the finance industry, it hasn't changed in the 10 years since we've been doing Money to the Masses, where they are all talking to each other in little meetings or big meetings and patting each other on the back with awards and all that kind of thing, while consumers are left kind of outside the huddle. And they're then sold products that they probably don't even want, and jargon and that kind of stuff. And there's lots of innovators who say they do things with a lack of jargon and everything like that. But really, they start to morph into what they try to innovate. These disruptors tend to end up becoming what they were trying to disrupt, because that's where the profits are. Banks have been around for hundreds of years. The reason they are because they're successful at what they do. If you look at the number of people that were, say, peer-to-peer lenders and things like that start to want to try and become regulated and want to morph into actually be banks, they actually start turning into the very thing that they said they were trying to innovate and disrupt. So I think it's almost like a marketing ploy. So I think that's my thing. I'd still like change. I don't think the industry's changed all that much. I think it will change as more and more younger people come in. One thing I do think, and I'm on a bit of a soapbox here, is that the combination of tech and finance, fintech, is throwing up some great innovations, but also throwing up some kind of quirks, in my view. I think a lot of people who are making products because they want that tech idea of make something, sell it, that idea of trying to sell something the next day to somebody else. And I think a lot of fintech ideas are actually being spawned, these apps, a lot of them we talk about, that are being made because they're going to sell them on to someone else. They're never going to be profitable. They're never really bothered about it. They're just trying to get as many customers so the big banks buy them. Anyway, that's me off my soapbox. So anybody else want to change anything?
I think that it should be a bit more accessible. And I know at Money to the Masses, that was one of the main things that we do, trying to spread financial knowledge to everyone. But, even when I talk to some of my friends, simple things like balance transfers, it's not common knowledge. And I think it should be more transparent to allow people to have a better understanding of personal finance. And obviously, I know it's a hot topic about teaching personal finance in schools, and it's something that I am really passionate about, particularly with the Millennial Money series as well. I think it's really important to help educate people just so that they can make their own financial decisions based on knowledge that they've managed to gain themselves. But obviously, when you leave school or university, if you want to learn about buying a house or getting a mortgage, you have to find it out by Googling it. And then even when you Google it, you can't always find out what you want to know because it's full of jargon. And I just think that if it was a bit more accessible to the everyday person, then a lot more people would be educated to make better financial decisions.
So I think we could go on all day, but we're going to bring this towards a close with one last question. I want any of you to say about the areas of finance that excite you or could even bore you. So who's going to go first on this one?
I'm going to sound like a bit of a loser now, but since I've been at Money to the Masses, budgeting, I find it like it makes me sound like such a loser, but I really like budgeting now. I've literally become obsessed with budgeting my money within an inch of its life. Like, I budget everything, even down to like going out for a drink pre-COVID. I would budget to go out for a drink and for that amount that night. And now, because I'm saving for a house, I think some people already know this because I've mentioned it before, but I am now obsessed on how much money I can save in each paycheck. Now, obviously, each paycheck I get paid the same amount of money, but I try and budget my money even further to try and save more money. And I think I worked it out. Now I save almost 3/4 of my salary each month because I've literally saved so much money by cutting down my phone bill.
Andy's eyes and face just said it all there. Andy's eyes almost popped out his head about the idea of saving 3/4. You're like ninja level budgeting, Lauren.
I'm literally so obsessed now that I look at everything. I'm becoming so frugal. If I get a deal come up, I'm like, right, I'm on a sim only deal now, but something else has come out. I could save £2 there a month. I'll swap it over.
Lauren, I think we almost should do a sort of Lauren's frugal section on these things, because I just have the passion you have. I just got carried away there watching you get so excited about the level of frugality, because it's something I'm no good at. I don't do it. I never enjoyed it. I was more on the other end of like, optimizing what you could do with money rather than the frugality part, because actually that's quite hard. You have to really research it. So people want Lauren coming on and telling us what she's done each week, and we can do that. Who's next?
I like the way, what's exciting is how people are talking about money now more, a bit like they're talking more about their mental health. People are sharing these money tips, sharing that how bad you were with money. And it's become a conversation now, whereas before I think people used to just put things in a drawer and forget about them. I think if you look at our Facebook group, the information they're imparting to try and share their issue or share what can I do now, I think is really exciting, because it tells you that it's going to come out into the open and people are going to share some really exciting tips.
Harvey, what's getting you buzzing at the moment about money?
Working at Money to the Masses in itself has opened up a whole different view for me. Looking at the world, trying to bust through all the jargon, trying to make things simpler, understanding just how much money we spend on the middleman who has somehow derived money from us just for knowing more than we do is eye-opening. I've always been frustrated by that. I've always been frustrated by how much of that space between a customer and the product gets occupied by people who want you to know less so they can make more money. And it's exciting for me that there are just people like us around who are trying to bust that open and let people see what they can know for themselves so that they can save themselves that money and get to the end product faster. I suppose that is exciting for me. I think as a society in Britain, we are less likely to talk about money. You know, people don't like to talk about their money, and that's changing. And I think the more we talk about where we've lost money and where we've maybe made some wise decisions, the more we share that in places like our forum on Facebook, it's encouraging to see people share their experiences and where they've perhaps made mistakes and where they've perhaps done well with one another, because that will move us forwards.
I think on that one, is like taking Harvey's point is that, I mean, we didn't ask Harvey to say that. She just said that for her own back. But the fact about money to the no, I had to just say that caveat because people think, oh, Damien's been really hard. He's put pressure on her. No, because we have these conversations all the time at Money to the Masses. There's a journey I went on from being in the industry to out of it and realising that you don't have to answer to the industry in the way they do things, and you can try and do it differently. And Harvey's on that journey and has realised that. And so that's one of the things that it's a completely different mindset. And there are people, we're not the only people. I mean, not many people out there doing what we do, but there are others trying to help consumers. The one thing you mentioned there about the Facebook group is quite interesting, because I've noticed as the groups got bigger, there are fewer and fewer anonymous questions. We hardly get anybody who wants to ask anonymous questions now, because I think they see that it's okay to talk about money and not be judged. People aren't going to sit there and judge you because you've got either no money or a lot of money. I think people just realise that what we did at the beginning of Money to the Masses, that the problems that people have, whether they're rich or they have no money, there are definitely some crossovers. They do share the same elements. Like Lauren talked about budgeting, or whether it's about tax. So there are things that are still common ground. And so people gain insight from answering all of those things. And they don't judge people because they've got more or they've got less. They're still sharing their knowledge, even if they're not the same position in life, that say this is how I did it or what I did it. And also the idiosyncrasies of money I like is the fact that there is different. There isn't a perfect solution to nearly anything in money. There are things that are better to do than other things. But you look in that Facebook group, what's interesting, people go down and say, well, this is what I do. And people like that. It's not advice. It's just seeing what other people, how they've tackled the same problem you've encountered. Yeah, so I mean, my quick one I would add in there is that I'm quite excited about the idea that of technology, as much as I sort of gave it a little bit of a knock, is that the things like Lauren talked about budgeting, that's been opened up by apps out there. And I use many of them, even day to day. And I think there's never been a better time to be wanting to take control of your finances because of the technology and costs and competition. So, Justin, I know you wanted to come in.
Just one thing the thing that excites me is our individual and collective ability to make money now has never been greater. So whether you're somebody who's just wanting to start out on a hobby and try and turn it into a business, you or someone that decides, you know what, I'm going to be opportunistic and make face masks. Our ability to do small enterprises or big enterprises and make money on our own as families, as communities, as businesses has never been easier. The platforms that are out there like Etsy, there's free websites, there's social media, you don't even have to have a website. I think as you go into the new year, it's new year, new you. It's such an amazing time to be able to sit there and go, we are living in a technological revolution where we can make money, take payments of credit cards from people, take transfers from internationally, ship internationally. It is amazing. And I don't think people should underestimate how lucky we are to do that and should look into it. And I think one thing that I would say to anyone who wants to do it is just you could spend a bit of time researching and you'll find some great solutions that are free. And you're already on your way to making money from that point because you're not paying for a lot of these services, or you pay when you make money. So that's one of the things I would say is probably for me the most exciting, that all of us have the opportunity to make extra income that we never had before.
Actually, on that, Justin, I think that's a really good point. And for listeners who are new to us and may not have known that we have actually got a podcast series that we created that specifically looked at that, opportunities where people have taken a big leap of faith. They've had a passion and they followed it through to a very good amount of success. So that podcast is called the One Giant Leap podcast. Damien interviewing a number of inspiring people. So I'd recommend you check that out.
So I think we'll wrap it up there. This we could do this again if people want us to do it again and have questions for individuals. Then we could do a collective podcast because it's been quite fun actually. If you want to contact anybody in the group, you can do directly because people's emails are just their first name and then at moneytothemasses.com. So it's obviously Damien, Andy, Liam, Laura, Lauren, Harvey, and Justin. So if people want to contact about anything they've spoken about, then do feel free. Or it'll probably be easier to ask the questions within the Facebook group, which is, again, facebook.com/groups/money to the masses. So I will say, as usual, Andy, is that it? We're done?
We are done. Until next time.
We're done. So, well, actually, no, we won't be till next time. We're not going to have a podcast next week. We're going to have a week off because it's Christmas. And then we'll be back in the first week of the new year. So it's 1 week off.
So that's it. I suppose what's left is for us all to say a goodbye and a Merry Christmas. So we're waving for people who can't see us. And goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.